Alright, 2024 Code of Georgia Mental Health Examination Treatment Exception of the Mental Illness Article Shift of the rights of the patient, of the right of the privilege of the patient, of the reps of the exception of the general of the provision, retention of the right of the patient, of the generally rights of the due process, of the patient, of the trial, of the right of the privilege of the grant of the other person, of the not of the provision of the law, of the contrary, of the no whether the receiver that you receive, shift of the mental illness, of the deprived, of any of the shift of the political, personal, of the property, of the rights, of the control of the legal income, for any person without due with the process of the law. Patients right with the to legal counsel with the responsible for the department of every patient with the given over the applicant of the legal counsel with the other expense with the reference of the connection of the private personal with the domestic business criminal of the criminal of the legal matters which are involved during the hospitalization. Communication with the visitation rate of the patient with the inspection restrict with the censorship of the patient with the corresponding with the establishment of the regulation with the governing business use of the telephones. Each of the patients with the facility should have the right to communicate freely with the privacy with the person outside of the facility with the receiver with the visitor with the inside of the facility except for the otherwise provided with the code section. Even the patient will allow with the receiver the ends of the shield with the unopened mail. No patient with incoming outgoing mail shall be opened with a delay with the help of the censor by the facility with if there is reasonable ground to leave the incoming mail with the contain with the items with the substance of the which may be the danger of the patient over the other with the other chief of the medical with the officer with the direct with the reasonable examination. Such mail with the after the examination may be regulated with the disposition of the terms item substance of the found with the and therein with all the writings roughly presented with the patient within 24 hours of inspection. Chief of the medical officer may have live with the core with the temporary order of the restrict with the outgoing mail with the core with the terms of proper call with the existence of the mail with the danger for the patient over the other with the core with the mail or with the staff of the temporary restrict with the provide with the full fair hearing shall be held with the 5 days after the issue of the temporary or with the determined whether or not the order restrict with the extent of the time shall issue with the note of the event shall be restricted with the pursuing with the staff of the temporary or with the more than 5 days of the after of the day with the temporary order. Full fair hearing shall be held with the insurance of the temporary order of starts with the hearing with the patient's outgoing mail with the determined the danger of the patient with the other of the core of the may order such of the mail with the restrict with the extent of the period of the not exceeding 30 days restrict with the 10 period with the renewed for the additional period of the not exceeding 30 days each of the provided such of the restriction of the show with the renewed except for the final with the renewed fine to get over the full of the fair hearing for each of the renewal show of the mail with the dangers of the patient with the evidence in conjunction with the role saying with the mail with the patient with the issue of the core of the client chief of the medical officer of the restrict with the outgoing mail with the provide with the order of the court. No restriction either the incoming outgoing subsection C and the D of the code section C with the period of 5 days of the night with the or with the restrict with the traffic of the mail with the longer period with the provide such for the restriction continue with the necessary with the provide 95 day with the bond with the termination chief of the medical officer of the pride with each of the continuation such of the mail contain with the danger for the patient otherwise provide a third over the in case outgoing mail continuation period with the aggregate shall not exceed with the restriction period with the authorized court or with the corresponding with the partner over the patient with the attorney shall not restrict with the menu with the man with the code section correspond with the patient with the public official with the not restrict with any of the mayor in subsection C with the code section either the time application with the income of the mail with the order of the examined of the chief of the medical officer at the time of the patient with the outgoing mail same with the temporary court order with the written notice of the serve for the ordered notice of the right with the full fair hearing within 5 days to serve for the temporary court order shall be served with the patient on the patient with the representative of the provider with the code section 37.3.147 with the voluntary patient with the may with the written within such with the notice representative of the circumstances around with the examination and E with the mail in subsection C, D, and E or F of the code section shall be required with the patient's client record with the chief medical officer will authorize to establish the reasonable regulation governing visiting hours of the use of the telephones by the patient. Patient's right to the regard of the personal effects of the liability facility employed for the revenge of the loss of the damage of the patient's personal effects. Patient's right with the personal effects shall the restrict with the chief medical officer the temporary custody with the with the effect with the may recover the medical reasons make of the reasonable effort to ensure with the safety of the patient with the belonging with the employee with the chaplain with the reasonable love of the damage of the property wherever the reasonable safety precautions have been taken. Patient's right to vote. Each patient with the facility with is eligible to vote with a given the right with the primary, special, with the general election, with the in referendum, with the superintendent of the regional state, with the hospital, with the administrator. Each of the facilities shall have the permanent, reasonable, with the assistant of the patient, with the obtainment of the voter's registration form, with the application, with the absentee, with the ballot to comply with the other requirements prerequisite voting with the vote, with the absentee ballot is necessary. 37.3.144. Um, Employment patient outside facility with a patient with a which with the employed outside with the facility with the assistant with employment. A with the patient treatment of the house should be a shift of the efforts of the suitable employment the benefits of the line with the substance employment of the department of showing critical employment of the patient with the short with the training with the patient with the gainful employment after the discharge. All benefits of such employment shall accrue solely to the patient. education of the children undergoing treatment in the facility, with the rights of the children, with the treatment is appropriate to education, public and with it not be abridged with during the hospitalization, special education need with the child with an individually concerned with the respected form of behavioral health care, the development of disability, share with the Department of Education, share with the educate for the provide with the patient school age for the hospital, with any state with their own and state operated any of the designated facility. Representing the guardians of the item of the notification provision of the duration and scope of the guardianship. At the time of the person with the mental over the facility, the end of the chapter, soon and thereafter, with the reach roll of the possible the person condition of the mental state with the time of admission, so for the facility, with the diligent after of the show, with care with the name of the address of the least two, with the representative with the name of the address show, with the be entered with the clinician's clinical record. Patient may designate one representative of the second with the representative with the absent of the designation, one the representative of the patient with the role of the representative of the community select with the facility select with the role of the representative of the make one selection from among with the following person with the in order or listing patient with the mental health care agent with the legal guardian spouse with the adult with the child and with the parent with the attorney with the adult next to with the king with the adult friend with the provider with the in the case of the patient with the representative with the point with the court order in section 37-362 with the facility with not deflect different with the representative with the second with the representative shall be also selected from the above list without with regard to order listing with the provider with the second with the representative with the note with the person with the file with the petition with the person patient admitted to the facility. And facility with the unable to discover the least two with the representative after the diligence and with the department with the guardian of the patient with the factor with the end of the patient client record with the facility shall apply with the court over the county with the patient with the resident with the appointment of the guardian ad item ad litem. The guardian ad litem shall not be the department on application of the person with any of the motion with the court of the may appoint with the guardian ad litem with the patient with the two representatives with the head of the name with the appointment over the guardian idiom even the necessary for the protection patient rights of the guardian idiom also act with the representative of the patient with the child with the power of the granted with the representative of the chapter. Anytime in the notice required with the chapter with the give it to the patient with the representative with the with the notice with the representative with the destiny with the code section of the patient with the guard adds litigum any such likewise served with unless over the wide for with the notice served over the person with the first class mail with the notes served with the mail with the record show with the name with the day with the mailing place with the patient with the client record should be complete with upon mailing. At the time of the notice, recover the chapter with the give of the patient, with the day with the time of the notice, shall with the give of the dent with the patient, with the clinical record with the patient, with the unable, the competent, with the written over the reach from, with the after, with the exam with the notes, him or her with the time of the enter, with the order, with the pursuing with the chapter, such over the notice, with the day with the entry, with the order, shall with the serve with the patient, with the reference, with the provide with the subsection D, with the code section, notice, over the involuntary with the patient with the mission with the facility with the given and his or her with the representative with the writing with the chef with the mission with the emergency with the receiver of the facility and also with the given the facility with the ration with the representative with the telephone with the person as possible every instant of the course with the point of the guardian ad litem with the person pursuing with the terms of this chapter with the chef of the guardian with the living person with the order of the court with the shell with the automatically 90 days with the lesser time with the shave with the door with the responsible the guardian ad litem shall with the united extend beyond the specific report purpose of the employment. Right of the patient representative with the addition of the right of habeas corpus, the judicial of the protection right of the privileges granted by this chapter. Anytime without know of the person with the detained with the facility with the mental health care, legal guardian with the relative with the third friend but a half such with the person with the mention with the five with the law with the writ of habeas corpus with the question in the case of the legality of the detention of the request of any of the court competent to restrict their own initiative with the issue with the writ of the lease, provided in the case of the set of the position of the lease of person with the detained with the facility with the pursuing with the court order code section 17 through 7 and 130, 17, 7 and 131. Cap of the position along with the proper certificate of serve of the shall also be served with the president, judge of the court ordering the detention of the prosecutor, determine the sheriff of the court, whichever that is made with the certified mail to the statutory of the overnight deliver the request, receive the request, recipient, return receipt requested. Patient and the representative of the filing with the position of the property court or alleging with the patient being with the unjustly denied over the right of the privilege of the chapter of the procedure of the authorized chapter beginning with the view of the untoward surrounding the position and the court shall have the authority conduct judicial inquiry to the issue of the property order to the correct any abuse under the chapter. Establish the receiver of the patient with the staff of the complaint with the making the final with the decision, establishing with the rules, regulation, implementation, procedure with the complaint, procedure for the ultimate of the legal remedies. Each facility shall establish procedure with the complaint with the petition and the complaint, with the staff with the concerning with the treatment of the patient, especially heard to leave with the final decision made with the superintendent of the regional state with the hospital administrator, president committee, whichever is approved with the board shall establish rules and regulation with the implementation of such procedure with the however the patient shall not require to utilize with the procedure in lieu of the other available legal remedies. Right to appeal order to probate court with a juvenile court hearing, examine the patient over the payment over the cost of the appeal with the right to subsequent appeal with the right to legal counsel with appeal. For the patient, over the patient, over the representative of the patient, over the term of the management, over the order of the probate court, over the hearing of the officer, over the render, over the proceed, with the chapter, over the superior, over the court, over the county, over the proceeding was held with except for the provided with the article 6 of the chapter 9 of the title 15 of the May appeal with the order of juvenile court, render with the proceed with the own chapter over the court, over the appeal Supreme Court, appeal Supreme Court, with the shall with the same in the manner of the as appeal with the probate court, with the superior of the court, except that there's appeal shall with the heard with the before of the court, sitting and justifying, jury with the essing of the practical no later than 30 days shall follow on the date of which of the appeal is filed with the dark clerk of the superior court of the appeal of the order of the juvenile court of the court of the appeal Supreme Court forever with the law but was it heard with the exemption of the possible the patient with the must apply with the cause of the filing of the appeal with the authorized with the code section make of the affidavit that he or she with it as long as the pay the cause of the patient shall retain over the review with the any over the order superior with the court of the court of the appeal Supreme Court with the provided law with the patient shall with the right to the counsel with the unable to available for counsel shall with the counsel appointed with the patient court with the appeal with the provided with the patient with the representative of the patient attorney code section in addition with the other appeal with the rights with the have with the provision with the right of the patient with the representative of the patient with the appeal does not deny with the right of the Department of Behavioral Health Care, the Development of Disability Appeal, and the General Appeal with the provision code section 534. Okay, that went from 37140 to 3150. Rights and privileges of the patient with the representative, etc. of the generally, and I'm going to check with to make sure that was all of them. That was all of them. We could go to examination, treatment, etc. for the mental illness, and that's the next thing.